Going to call the meeting to order. We have quorum. Yes.
And then some.
I want to read the recognition. London and Middlesex Community Housing provides housing on the traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, Lenapewauk, and Attawandaron. We acknowledge the local First Nations communities in this area, the territory of the Chippewa of the Thames, the Oneida of the Thames, and the Munsee Delaware Nation. We honor and respect the history, languages, and culture of the diverse Indigenous people who call this territory home. Today, the City of London and Middlesex County is home to many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people. We are grateful to have the opportunity to work and live in this territory. First, I want to do completion of and acceptance of the agenda. I want to propose one change in the order, which is to put the in-camera item, which is number 11, in front of the board workshop, which is number 10. So just to flip those two, so we're doing the board workshop last, and also one of the matters in camera is relevant to the board workshop. So with that amendment, unless somebody wants me to formally move it, so are we prepared to complete and accept the agenda? Moved by Kara, seconded by Greg. All in favor? So the agenda is now completed. Are there any disclosures of interest? Seeing none, we will proceed. The previous minutes from February 19th, 2026, I am going to assume that everyone has reviewed them. So is someone prepared to move and second them? Moved by Greg, seconded by Colin. All those in favor? Thank you very much. No communications, no delegations I'm aware of, and there is no consent agenda. So we'll go to item 9, which has 3 reports. Am I to assume they're all for approval? Is that correct? I think that's correct, isn't it? All right, so the first is staff report 2026-09, which is LMCH purchase authorization limits. That matter came, I believe, to the executive committee. Am I right about that? So the executive committee had approved those changes in limits, but perhaps, Paul, if you could just give a short explanation of the reason for those purchase limits changes.
Thank you. And through the chair, what you have is a report requesting amendment to purchase authorization limits, which sort of sets the thresholds for staff to approve expenditures. There are a number of changes and outlined in the table in the report, essentially moving the limit for the chief executive officer from 75,000 to 120,000, and in creating financial authority limits for the chief operating officer, which did not exist, and updating the authority for director of asset renewal. I will point out in the report that, as discussed at executive committee, the $150,000 limit in the report for the CEO approval has been reduced to 120,000 based on best practices in public sector procurement standards. So happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Mover and seconder for that. Moved by Kara, seconded by Greg. I can tell you that that was discussed at the executive committee meeting. Explanations were given for that, and we accepted that they were reasonable answers. But I'll open up for questions from members. All right, there being none, all in favor? That matter is passed with the cautions, don't spend too much too quickly.
I only spend what you let me.
That's right. Then 9B is staff report 2026-10, which is a multi-site electrical construction contract award. John, is this the first time we're seeing this, or is this?
No, that was seen at the FAR committee, approved at the FAR committee.
All right, great, thank you. So go ahead. Is there something you want to add to what was presented at the committee?
No, it's reads as per presented at the FAR committee. So
all right, can I get a mover and seconder? Moved by Gary, seconded by Greg. Greg, do you want to mention anything about this? You're the chair of the committee, so.
sure, I'm happy to speak to it briefly. Yeah, John presented at the last FAR committee report. It's just an increase to a reallocation in the budget in order to award the contract to Yelco, large reputable contractor. They beat up the others in terms of the criteria that are shown on the in-camera attachment that was in the report. I have no concerns with that. I'm very familiar with that contractor and our construction industry work, so I think that's a good award and support it.
Great, thank you. Any further questions or comments? There being none, all in favor? That matter is also passed. And the last report for approval, staff report 2026-11, which is project 2025-CMHC-02, which is the budget. John?
Thank you. And through the chair, this was not presented at the
Right.
FAR committee.
So we're seeing this, all of us are seeing this first time.
Yeah, and this report to approve an increase to that budget that Phil Chair mentioned to increase that from 1.45 million to 1.55 million. We're in the process of reviewing RFP submissions for air source heat pump installations, which were previously approved by the board as part of the CMHC program to make good on energy efficiency commitments. All the estimations exceed what was budgeted, and those submissions that we have received and we're reviewing, they're very close. I think they're about 20,000-30,000 apart. The reason that we wanted to bring it to the board and not wait for the next FAR committee and then the board is primarily because of there's a long lead time in equipment ordering ranging from 16 weeks to 28 weeks. And we want to get ahead of that, which is why it's in front of the board today.
Thank you very much. So can I get a mover and second? I'll get the chair to move that. Greg, seconded by Colin. Questions or comments? I'm not sure if anyone's had an opportunity, Colin. Mayor Grant, I'm going to call you Colin. I know you're Mayor Grant.
Oh, that's probably more appropriate. Is that just a result of the economy right now? Like the fact it's over budget? It's not yours, is it?
Yeah.
Just that's the way that it is right now.
Hard to say because it was pretty close. So the $100,000 is a tad more than we need, but we're just trying to be safe and cleaner that way. There's on a 1.4 million, $1.45 million bid, they're about 30 to 60,000 above that, which is pretty close. Which means we budgeted like pretty darn good with our engineering consultant, and yeah, it could be some economic reasons behind it as well.
Yeah, just more curiosity.
Anything further? Questions, comments? All right, it's been moved and seconded. All in favor? That matter is passed. Next are the FAR reports for information. So I'll be turning it over to the chair. Perhaps you'll provide us with a summary and we can then move and second it.
Sure. Through the chair, this is the draft unaudited financial results for 2025 for the organization. This is the report that's gone to the auditors for review. And for just to receive this for information, at the FAR committee, Paul presented the details on this and just quick highlights. What we need to know is the small surplus for 2025. Highlights in there are higher rent revenues overall by $1.3 million versus budget. And some expenditures were higher as well, overall $1.1 million. Notable items in there would include cleaning and pest control, which were coming in higher than budget, but we don't have any concerns on that. Additional expenditure, and bottom line, the budget is in a small surplus position. So, or sorry, the actual are in a small surplus position.
You prepared to move that then?
I will move that.
Seconder, seconded by Kara. This is report for information only. Any further comments, questions? Yes, Colin.
I just have one. The mortgage on Reimagine on Southdale, have we started paying that? Is that payment? I got a question, but where does the interest payment show up? Do they show on our financials or on this?
So in 2025,
Yeah.
LMCH was mortgage free
Okay.
and debt free. In 2026, we will start reflecting two things:
Yeah.
reserve contribution for the new build, which is a requirement, and so that will start segregating that and showing that as something. And then when the mortgage is repayable. So there's a stabilization period, as CMHC calls it, so we anticipate that'll be by the end of 2026, and that will show up in the finance section. We just haven't, it's a zero line now, but there's a place within our financials for that to show up. So you'll see that in the finance, and as soon as we finalize the sort of the flow, we'll project out to the Finance and Audit Risk Committee on what we think that is, and just confirm that we have the funding to cover it.
Yeah, that was my question. But that'll cover the financial guru. The interest would show up in the operating,
Correct.
right?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
So what coming through the operating statement will be the mortgage payment.
Right.
Interest and principal, and then that will be managed. Okay. Separately. So you'll see, because it's coming out of operating revenues, how we're
Right.
paying
Right.
the full mortgage chart cost.
Anything further? All those in favor? That matter is approved. Thank you, Greg. The next reports are reports that I think were at the push committee. Am I right about that? But they require approval. The first matter is staff report 2026-112, which is health and safety and WHVSH policies. Can I just get a mover and seconder for that? Moved by Kara, seconded by Greg. I just want to mention that report. Dirk was presented those to us a couple of nights ago. Was it last night or Tuesday night? I don't know. Tuesday night. And there aren't really any, this is a review of the policies, but I don't think there were any substantive changes in those two policies. I think I'm right about that.
Yeah, through the chair, there's a mention of the mental health and psychological safety.
Yeah.
In the introduction, but there's no specific revisions to actions or accountabilities in the report. So it's just trying to reflect that principle.
All right. We have I mean, procedurally, there has to be a review of the policies on an ongoing basis. That's what happened. Not many changes were made. So I hope that's helpful. Any questions, comments? All those in favor? That matter is passed. And similarly, staff report 2026-13, which is the smoke-free workplace policy. Can I get a mover and seconder? Moved by Kara, seconded by Kathleen. Similar thing. It's a policy that was reviewed, not really any substantive changes to it. And you still can't smoke in the workplace for anybody who may be keen on doing that. I don't think that amendment was in there. So any other questions, comments? All in favor? Thank you. The next matter is the LMCH accessibility report. What we were asked to approve last night was actually the accessibility plan. Am I right about that? Maybe you could take a couple of minutes. It's an important document, so it'd be great if Sarah just spent, Sarah, who I often call Sandra, will present.
Been called worse.
Yeah,
So
she's used to it a little bit, but I'll let you just maybe summarize for us. It would be helpful.
through the chair, we are seeking your approval of our multi-year accessibility plans from 2026 to 2030. This is a core piece to put us in line with compliance from an AODA perspective. So there's a fundamental path to do this. The other part is that it really does put forward our organizational statement towards our requirements around accessibility. We've done a lot of wonderful work actually over the last few months. There's it's one of the reports for information in terms of our AODA committee. These are all essential pieces of what's called the plan. The reason why it's so important to bring it to the board is because part of this compliance piece is that we articulate our intention to the public. And so this will live on our website. So this is what our team has done in terms of drafting the 5-year plan. There's different pieces in terms of HR, tenant facing pieces, communications. And it really is a corporate document that covers the entire span of accessibility needs. But the work really is with us to operationalize how we serve tenants, how we make accommodations, whether for staff or for tenants. And this plan articulates our intention to do so, and the capital work obviously required to do so.
Great, thank you very much. And the committee did approve it last night. So I need a mover and a seconder. Moved by Kathleen, seconded by Greg. Questions, comments? Colin?
Yeah. And yeah, I agree. This is an important report, just in terms of the capital upgrades. I know there are grants out there, possible grants. That's something that we go after. Or is it the city go after? Cause I know there's AODA, there's
Yep.
grants out there.
It's also, so I just remind folks that part of the CMHC funding we're receiving is to improve accessibility across our portfolio.
Okay.
So that's a big significant investment. Part of our CM new builds requires us to be compliant with accessibility and build form and accessible units. So, and where there's other funding available, we will seek that out.
But it's us who do that, right? It's not the city.
It is us.
It's the corporate.
Yeah.
I was curious about it. Yep.
So, and I would just sort of say the physical accessibility aspects are the easier ones for us. Right? So certain things that we can do in our units and our buildings and some things we can't.
Yeah.
And so we do that, but where we struggle is complex accessibility requirements for other forms of disabilities that are not sort of mobility related. And that's where we know we need to strengthen, and that's where the focus of Sandra is. But I will say that we do routine.
He did it too.
I know.
I started
Phil,
we had a pre-meeting and
And I was doing it.
planted the
Yeah.
seed. But so the capital team does routine door openers, ramps, accessibility work all the time.
Yeah.
It's built in, it's sort of, it's working great. So the work and our focus is about communication on accessibility requests and the softer side of things. And that's where we as an organization need to strengthen our service.
I just have a second one, Chair.
Go ahead.
And just Sarah, not Sandra. I just thought I'd get that in there.
Oh, good for you.
Is the requirements the same? I know we're a public entity, but if we were a private landlord, are the requirements the same or are they different because we're a public entity?
So I would say, okay, so I don't, through the chair, I actually don't know the answer, but I would say that it is probably, there's some language on every business owner is required to be in compliant with AODA. There's
Right.
probably some language out
Yeah.
there. I believe there's a greater responsibility on public organizations.
Okay.
And I'd say I feel the pressure of that through achieving compliance with the ministry. Cause you're right, so it's like, if we have this group, like, we really gotta get them in order. The public, there's fundamental accountability, we're taxpayer funded, all these pieces that make it so. I imagine the private sector is a little bit more difficult for them to manage, potentially, but I do believe we all fall under the umbrella. Like, if you
Yeah.
provide a type of a building or a type of a service, you should be AODA.
Yes,
compliant,
agreed.
right? But there's greater pressure and greater expectation probably on public sector,
Public?
probably
okay.
rightfully so.
All right. So it's not a level, it's possibly not a level playing field.
Well, I think.
Or,
I think what is where the playing field does start to feel a little bit unleveled is when you actually look at explore things like if you're looking at like for like business, so like a high rise here and one of our high rises, well, there's probably a greater likelihood based on we know how some individuals receive their income that they do have an accessibility requirement because, for example, large portion of ODSP individuals, right? So there's some natural things that you may say there may be a different level of burden from that perspective, but it is also our responsibility.
right.
So it's a difficult thing to balance, but where I do believe the question around our exposure is around the point of undue hardship. And that will be, and so I think we're treated the same as anyone, for example, at high-rise building here, high-rise
Yeah.
building there. And it might be on paper true, but in actuality, given the complexity we serve and the amount of funding we get, our undue hardship, I think, is a lower threshold, but we'll never, that's not something we can argue.
Yeah. No, it's more curious about just
Yeah.
if we have to pay more, right? Because we're a nonprofit, like a public facing.
Well, it might be reasonable to think that,
Yeah.
in some ways, I know pay more is not the way, but we may have a greater accountability to more people.
I'll say that. 'Cause I'm like,
Yeah, I would say greater accountability to more people.
I like that, greater accountability. Yep.
Yeah. Questions, and I can maybe give you a partial answer to your question as well. just from my private sector experience, I would say what drives accessibility standards in buildings is the building code. That's kind of the base level.
Yeah.
Everyone's got to meet that. There are higher standards within CMHC financing guidelines that would exceed building code. And actually CMHC has, for private sector, has a financing program they call MLI Select, and they give you ratings. There's 3 different rating levels that you can achieve depending on how many buckets you tick off in adding greater levels of accessibility or accommodation.
Right.
So that was my answer there. So then
Oh, that makes sense. I understand that.
my question then to Sarah, and I'm glad Paul in his comments referenced the CMHC guidelines for the buildings, because I didn't see a reference to that in here, and I would just want to make sure that the accessibility plan has acknowledged or knows what the requirements are for CMHC in the buildings. And to the extent that those all match up, great. If they don't, which do we want to have 2 different standards, like one for the CMHC buildings, which may be at a higher standard, and one for the rest of the buildings? So I don't know if that's been looked at.
Through the chair, so we blanketed capital work in a large bucket. So I think that does get covered within the work of the capital portfolio. However, us meeting the standard is not us meeting those requirements. It is meeting the individual where they are at and what their needs are. So even if though all those things were to be true, that's where the undue hardship piece is difficult. But our responsibility is meeting the tenants so that they can live a daily life well, free of barrier, free of, all of, and so that will never get covered in those requirements because it is very individualized. We do receive medical records, for example. We do have family advocates, for example. There's a very deep tenant engagement component to this, which we didn't come out of the gates like sprinting. We've had to really kind of organize ourselves internally and say, how do we, the physical fixes are our easiest part. No offense, John. It's the managing the circumstances by which people have these requirements has been historically difficult for us to manage, and moving forward must be less difficult because tenants are saying, I'm just asking for a basic need, and there's a couple other things, but and I'm not getting what I need. We're like, oh, but we put the handlebar. That doesn't, but they also maybe need a caregiver. Maybe they have this, maybe they have, right? And so then we get into RGI overlay to it on housing. So I would say the capital bucket, I think, is well in hand. We could, though, like get more refined, and maybe our next plan should be better. This is our first right step forward. And the goal is that we can achieve the things we say in 5 years. And this is a huge piece of work that we're just starting to understand as an organization. And we haven't necessarily totally budgeted for either. There's a lot of pieces here that are new to us. So outside of
Oh,
capital.
that's fair. Thank you for that answer.
Yeah.
I think this is a great step forward, and appreciate the work that's gone into this plan.
Anything further? All right, it's been moved and seconded. All in favor? Thank you very much. So that completes the FAR reports and the consent or the approval items from the push committee. So the push committee for reports for information, I chaired the meeting. Mayor Grantham wasn't able to attend, so I was happy to step in just to give you some highlights. I thought, in summary, I think the one thing that I would take from the meeting we had and all of those reports was that we're becoming more forward-looking in terms of the issues we have to face than sort of dealing with things after they arise, which is a really good thing. I also said to the staff that was there is a lot of this information in these reports is really good information for me to have when I go make my annual presentation to City Council, because there's some real positives in it. And so the format now I also appreciate, which is the COO makes an overview report, which is really helpful to get that from her. So I want to thank Sarah for that. And so she makes a report, and then we have the individual reports, and I find that fairly easy to follow. We are getting our first community office at the Warncliffe buildings, which I think is great. I was there when it was sort of first being cleared out to do that. There will be a grand opening in May, which I assume the board will hear about.
Once we can confirm the date of our move-in, yeah.
Right. So then that would be a great event to attend. I thought we did really well at Reimagine One when we had an event with the board there, and if we can get some dignitaries out, I think it's a really good event. We also talked about Reimagine One. There's good news from there. It's now 90% occupied, which is good. I found it interesting because there were some initial, I think, issues getting it occupied. We have more 4 bedrooms or something like that. Am I right about that? That may be tougher to rent.
No, our initial interest, if you look at like, okay, we had this big groundswell through the
Yep.
terrace up front. Their interest was more for 1 and 2 bedroom initially.
Initially, but through our work. And the other thing is, as it was indicated through the grants, we have accessible units. So a little more challenge in trying to rent out those different types of residences, but now it's 90% occupied. We've all been out there. That's going to be our second community office. So we're decentralizing a little in terms of having the offices right where people are. I always think that's a good thing. So that was really good to hear. We also heard that the pest infestation rate is down to 11%. And I think target was 10, which I thought was overly ambitious, but
15.
15. So
So
you're
15 was our target for the end of Q4.
Right.
Sort of recognizing where we were at and where we're going. So at 15, we haven't established a 2026 target. That's something we're going to be doing imminently when it comes to the next cycle of the board.
really good news. I think, that enables me when people are saying you've got this terrible problem, I can say, well, actually, here's where we are. So the only that it would be really interesting, and I talked to Sarah about this at one point, and I asked her about it, is comparing it to rates in private sector. But as she indicated, people don't generally like to tell you the infestation rates they have in their own buildings. But I think this is really good. This is really good news and tells us we're doing the right thing in that area. So I was happy to hear that. We, of course, approved the accessibility report. We've started annual unit inspections, and arising out of that is 257 work orders, which is good to have those, good to get those done. I think that again is proactive. We're doing the inspections, we're finding out what's there, and we're getting it fixed. People won't be able to say, look, you're not doing anything sort of about it. The next thing is the custodian program is now sort of being launched. You'll remember that we were going from, people providing that service to in-house. And so there was a pretty thorough report about what their targets are going to be for cleanliness. So that's, again, something that I really think is proactive. I think the other thing that I heard about it was that communications did not really have much negative to report. And I said, that's a good thing, not to hear from you about that. And Greg may have a question about this. The reporting on the fire was felt to be fairly balanced in terms of other reports that we have had. So I think that means that we're doing a good job in communications, if that's what's happening. But it's not just communications, it means we're doing a good job on stuff. So eventually you were relegated to the kids' table until we got a really good. So you may be back at the big table for next meeting. Yeah. Well, but I really appreciate that. I think it's great. I think we've had some great sort of initiatives, and we may be able to even continue that at Warncliffe by having a good rollout and doing that way. So thank you very much for that news. And the last interesting and not surprising to me news was in terms of the community safety report. The one thing that stood out to me was some of our proactive work has taken a bit of a backseat over the winter months to issues of trespassing and people being in buildings. And we hear about that all the time. I asked if that was a symptom of what we see more broadly in the city, people looking for places that they can be during difficult weather. And there's no empirical evidence, I don't think, to show that, but it's an interesting trend that, again, I think it's something that everybody needs to be aware of, that this is just seems to be a sign of our time. So I thought it was a really positive group of reports. So I'm pleased. I'm not going to move it because I'm chair. So I would if I was just committee chair, but I'd ask someone else to move and second it. Moved by Colin, seconded by Gary. Questions, comments about any of those reports, Colin?
Yeah, I'll apologize up front. This one chair, because I always bring it up, but the community safety unit. I remain concerned for, I don't want their officers, if that's what I'm gonna call them, because that's what they are. And their safety. I just think as an oversight as the board, because it is probably the most dangerous occupation we have within our group of employees, or the potential for the most danger. And I don't know if it's possible, at some point in time, I think we need to review, I call it the rules of engagement for a community safety unit, like what are their procedures, what are their guidelines? What is the training, I just feel this one is fraught with peril. I know they have a job to do and it's a necessary job. I just remain concerned about the rules of engagement. I don't know if there are such a thing, like what are their rules? I think that is the right word. It's a military term, rules of engagement, but what is their processes and their procedures, just to make sure that they're safe, especially with things, because we are in a pretty violent society right now, and to protect them, but also to protect the corporation and the board. I think we really need a good handle, to say the board has approved, because I don't know if a board has ever approved what their processes are and what they're supposed to do.
Okay, well, why don't Sarah, why don't you address that issue? But also we also talked at the meeting a little bit about police and how you involve police. And so maybe that would be interesting. When do our people call police? Our security people say, this is too much,
Mm.
we'll engage police.
Through the chair, so there's a couple of pieces in there, and remind me if I missed something in the response. So, since Margaret has joined us in her senior manager role, these are questions that she has been asking, and we've been exploring a little bit differently. It's also why we were changing how we report the data, to better understand the work that our community safety specialists do. Another piece that we are looking at is around some of those safety procedures. So we have the same concerns too. And so we are looking at, and we actually have tightened up a few areas and really to ensure that they're not putting themselves in harm's way where we could have otherwise anticipated. The challenge that will be persistent, even if we get to the point of maybe getting more specific, is around how situational a lot of our, in particular, trespassing activity is. So things happen very quickly. They have de-escalation training. That's a key part of the training in those things. And so are they backing away, calling police, or are they actively trying to move along the trespasser? Those are things we haven't quite gotten to yet. But we are extremely focused on staff safety primarily across a lot of different things we do. It's not just this area.
Yeah.
A lot of our staff actually can have the potential to be exposed to situations which might cause one to feel uneasy. So we are in a kind of a big push right now and trying to look at all of those processes. This area in particular focus, but across a few of our roles. If you're asking for like situational procedures, I don't think we necessarily have that. Like we do in some circumstances, but I don't think it get into exactly what you are getting at. So that can be something we look at moving forward as well too.
I just think it's pretty, what caused me my initial concern, I'm on the police board.
Yeah.
And I know when I see a report from a housing corp that has a use of force.
Yeah.
Report, that just causes me alarm. I want to make sure, first of all, that staff are safe,
Yeah.
right? And also to protect the corporation, to make sure we have put in place. Because if any of them were untoward were ever to happen.
Yeah.
You don't want anybody to be able to say, didn't have the training, which I suspect they do.
Yeah.
Or be, a guideline or a standard operating procedure wasn't put in place, right? So I did what I thought was right. I had never been told not to engage. And that's all I want to make sure is that at some point we have those in place.
Yeah. part of it too, to your point through the chair, is around our engagement with police. So we're trying really hard to strengthen our relationship. Response times will help us align a little bit differently as well too, if we could increase those, and we're working together to see how that can work moving forward. The one piece you mentioned around safety component. So we are very clear in our direction that if you feel as though you are in harm's way, you stop what you're doing. And that's for the community safety specialist. But even if our CRW goes to a unit, we are really enforcing that principle. Because housing, as I'm sure you've all learned from being around this table, like hasn't built in those same buffers and boundaries as other in other, I guess, what we call sectors have. And that took me by surprise when I first came here. Like coming from a hospital, we have very strict protocols, there's very strict processes, there's very strict hard lines of, when a patient goes beyond, a certain point. And when you're in there and when you're in people's homes and communities, those lines become a little bit different. And because things are so situational, it becomes different and things change quickly. Our sites are, due to the trespassing activity alone, we cannot have no proactive presence. Moving people along is fundamental to the safety of our staff day to day, and us protecting our assets, right, from damage, fire, all those things. Police don't do that. If you look at the volume of trespassing, I'm just hanging out one little area. So their role is so important, but I do hear you on the use of force piece, and we've heard, I've heard you when you mentioned in the past, is why we're looking at tightening up some of these protocols, building that, part of that partnership with London Police. And everything we do has to focus on staff safety first. We have to be like staff safety obsessed, right? But we're an organization who I talk to other people in this sector, see the same thing, seen a lot, get used to a lot, have a kind of higher threshold because of the generalized activity sometimes we can see. And so we've become, I can say dependent on this team to help us do those in the moment situational things that need quick action, quick movement. They become imperative. If we were calling police for them to come every time we're worried about staff safety, tenant safety, or our building asset protection, it wouldn't work well for us. The responsivity isn't there, and it probably never would be, even if the staffing was different.
Because I know we got a police officer behind me, and I know they have pretty strict guidelines and training on use of force and things like that, right?
So maybe is that something that might be part of Colin's asked about it a couple of times, maybe
Yeah.
part of an upcoming report?
Yeah. If you,
Thank you, Chair. I would like to see that only gain
Yeah.
because
The other part of that is, their use of force, right? I think you've included it, but you don't want to run into a situation where one of your employees, or one of our employees, I should say, has harmed somebody,
absolutely.
right?
Yeah.
and that's one of my concerns too, Phil,
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
made, right?
Just remind, LMCH implemented body worn cameras.
Yes.
When we first introduced the community safety specialist, to sort of make sure we manage that risk. And, they do receive use of force training on an annual basis using the standardized use of force management model, which is the same model that we've been using in the industry and policing and corrections and security for a very long time, which always emphasizes verbal interaction and verbal de-escalation and things like that. So they're trained in it, and the hope is that they'll never use it. The reality is you walk into something and you use the use of force to defend yourself, right? Because you're in a situational kind of environment, and that's where we, if they can't run away with confidence, then they may not do that. So we do have the standardized tools, and we're reviewing them to see, how have they evolved since their first envision 5 years ago, and what are the things we need to strengthen? What are the things we need to add to our toolbox for our staff? And I will say, the availability of the community safety specialist has, I think, let other staff let go of some of that. I need to keep my building clear of people. I need to manage this eviction, like other, that support staff detaching from sort of those high risk areas a little better and working closely with the police. And we do a lot of support for London Police Service. And try to build that relationship. So there, we just need to make sure that we're not taking on too much risk and not doing the role of the police in our communities, because that is not the intention.
Even what you just said verbally, I don't want to put words in, I would have thought that's what Colin's sort of asking. for.
Yeah.
In other words, tell us that they're getting this training, so we know.
Yeah.
Because I have to admit that I think you sort of think, okay, these people are facing difficult situations in our buildings. How does that work? Like, if you put me in one of those uniforms and said to go in there, I'd just go, like, I would just leave. I wouldn't get involved with somebody. But I mean, you know what I'm saying? Like, what did you train them so they have this special ability to do this properly? That's what I think Colin's.
That's what I want to see. I can encapsulate three things. What's their training? What's their standard operating procedures, right? So maybe it's just their training and the standard operating procedures.
Yeah.
And even just so the board can overall say yay or nay, that's what I think we need to do.
I don't think it's a yay or nay. I mean, we're not experts.
We have provided this information in a
Yeah.
number of time over the time. So we'll step back, bring it back together as a package.
Yes.
Standard operating procedures and processes are management approved.
Yeah.
And they adjust on an ongoing basis based on the circumstances that we experience in our communities. So bring it to so that said, we're happy to discuss
Program.
sort of, what is happening, what the intent is, and how these SOPs support that. But just to be clear, sort of that's always been the practice to sort of, we have policy framework that's approved at the board level, and then we have operational practices and SOPs and things like that that sit below that to tell us how to calculate.
I can accept that.
No, I think you're
Yeah.
right. I don't think you're right.
No, policy
has
is
to-
the right word, right?
Yeah,
So I may be using the wrong verbiage, but
Yeah.
just what the overall policy is, right?
And there is some policies that are actually under review right now that are board approved, that are scheduled
Yes.
to come back.
That's fine.
So we can sort of make sure it's a comprehensive approach.
Thanks. Anything further on those reports? Kathleen, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to share that I've had an occasion to have the community safety team come out a number of times, and I just found it so remarkable how positive they stayed and how that led to a good outcome. And they were very diplomatic and solving problems. And it was such a superior experience to having to call the city police. Not that the city police don't do a great job. I think they're under more of a time constraint maybe, or, their resources are spread a little more thin, but I am really pleased with the community safety team. I have so much faith in them. Yeah.
Thank you.
Gary?
Sure, just quick with you. Maybe Colin, just if I could, is it something you would like to see is like what the expectations are of these officers?
Yeah, that's really what it
Yeah.
is, right? And you're right. I guess I'll go to the policing. We both know policing, right?
Yeah.
The police board sets the policy. I mean, I don't want to set, the granular procedures. I just want to, I'll be blunt. I want to make sure we're not overstepping in our quest
Yeah,
to take care, right? And to protect the staff and the corporation.
I've heard of situations where like a community safety officer will make an arrest of a trespasser and wait 8 hours for the police to
Yeah.
get there, which I would imagine that's not an effective use of their time. I would think you'd want them off the property, right? As opposed to sitting there waiting in handcuffs for a police officer to come. Like seems logical to me. So that would be, I would think, like an expectation. One more, if you don't mind, Phil.
Yeah, go ahead.
Has there been any communication with the London Police about an office with housing? Like, because there's no secret that the police are like busting at the seams as far as office space. That would obviously probably expedite our response time, or sorry, London Police response time for housing matters.
The chair, because I'm new, I haven't been part of all discussions, but I have, like, looked into that. A different model. I've lived in Toronto before and stuff myself and know that there's different hubs in many places. Um, a lot of the literature around it though suggests that this wouldn't be, it's tricky because having policing present, like these are people's home communities and you're like, oh, that's.
True.
So that's the tricky balance. Not everyone is exposing our buildings as tenants to criminal acts, right? So it's more of a policing thing. Is like I don't know how the communities receive that.
It's a good-
It's not that I'm not willing to have
Yeah,
conversations. That's what the literature says.
Okay.
Is so if you go to Warrencliffe, and now we're opening a community office for them to get services. For example, what if that was a little police? I think that would be really hard for us to find a tenant who didn't wasn't like who I don't know if you'd want to live in that environment, right? And if you were, it goes all ways. That's tricky,
Yeah, yeah. I agree.
right? So, but I'm open to,
I would think there could be stigmatization, right? I mean,
yeah,
next thing you're gonna hear is people going, that building's so bad, they have police right
I
in.
know.
I don't,
Yeah.
I think you'd have to be really careful about that.
Maybe you would, yeah. So, but it would obviously prior lots of people's insight.
Yeah.
And just through the chair, we do know that sort of the model is different in other local housing corporations that or Essex, it really focused on police presence in one of their communities, built it went to sort of 24/7. And, so it's really, what do we need to achieve? What is the police looking to achieve out of this? What do we want to achieve out of this? And what is going to be the tenant impact? So I think it's something that we could be talking about, is what is that model that works best for everybody in a proactive community-based policing approach. So I think it's something we definitely could
Great.
talk through.
Anything further? Great. Again, a lot of great information at the meeting yesterday, which I really appreciated from staff. And the level of interest, I think is high in some of those things. Certainly from my point of view as chairing and being able to pass that information on when people raise sort of concerns that aren't backed up by evidence would be great. So thanks very much, Sarah. All those in favor then? Receiving that package. Thank you very much. So that completes the push committee reports for information. Next report is staff report 2026-15, which is director reappointments. Paul, I'll let you present that.
Thank you. And through the chair, just a quick report just to cover the conversations on the replacement of some board terms that are expiring. And the report recommends the reappointment of current directors Gary Bezier and Kara Alcock to the LMCH Board of Directors. Their terms expired December 31st, 2025, which really means after the AGM in 2026, which is a funny way to write it. But from my understanding, there's been conversations
Yes,
with the chair. And so what we just want to do is sort of much like any new director reappointment, have a formal report going to the board, sort of highlighting this so that there's a level of transparency on it before the AGM. So I think with that, I'm happy to defer questions to the chair if there is
Yeah.
any.
So I had as I normally do when people's terms are expiring, I contact them. I have a chat with them about whether they would like to continue on the board. Sort of a chat about their role on the board. Two different types of membership. One's a public member, that's Gary, and then the tenant representative, and that's Kara. Both indicated a willingness to come back. So that's the names who come forward. I think it's important that the people who rejoin or are new members all have that desire to become involved and do the work of the board. Kara has indicated, and I don't want to, I was waiting until we did this, but that she would be prepared to chair the push committee, which was going to involve some training and he's doing the old guy dance that my wife loves me to do it. She just loves it when I do that. And I think that's important because first of all, she would be the first tenant rep to chair that committee, I believe. And Colin also should not be chairing it, quite frankly. He's incompetent, I mean, he's busy.
I'll take that. If that gets me, you can call me whatever. Competent work.
I was good for so long. And then, no, I don't, I think he's going, I mean, we know why he shouldn't be chairing the committee. He's got other jobs to do. So I really appreciate him doing that. Gary, and Gary's, prepared and desires to continue. So that's where we are on that. I don't know if anybody wants to have a further discussion about it. I should say that we're going to have a further discussion about board governance in a little while when we're having a more maybe fulsome conversation about, and I'll be able to share sort of as chair how I feel about how the functionality of this board is. I hope that'll be a more open discussion. So that's all I have to say. I don't know if Kara or Gary want to speak to that, their desires or how they view it.
I don't have anything. No.
Okay.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, is somebody prepared to remove their reappointment? Greg's gonna remove it, Colin's gonna second it. All those in favor? Okay, so your names will go forward and they are approved at the annual meeting, I believe.
Yes, so that they'll be officially sort of how they do it at the AGM. They don't normally do it, but they'll have to work it into their script.
I don't think, it's ultimately up to the city council what they do. But,
Yes.
we can make the recommendation. So thank you and congratulations.
Thank you for your service.
Yeah, so in terms of the change of order, we'll go to the in-camera.
So could I,
Oh, yeah, sorry.
did
I miss something?
No, I did.
Oh,
I would just like to, if we can, just add a quick update on the 241 Simcoe fire, just before we go in camera. I meant to do that at the beginning.
yeah, I have no
So-
problem with just amending, where we can just have that in. That's just something for information.
Quick verbal update.
Okay,
Just to sort of, so
okay, so are we prepared to amend the agenda to add a brief verbal update from the CEO? Moved by Kara, seconded by Greg, all in favor. So we will add that to the agenda and go ahead.
thank you. And through the chair, as we're all aware, we had a fire at a 241 Simcoe site on Saturday, April 4th. Fire started around 6:25 a.m. and it was quite a significant event. So we were quite fortunate that emergency services responded immediately. We had London Fire Service, Middlesex and London Paramedic Service, London Police Service, of course, and London Transit Service to provide some shelter buses, in addition to LMCH staff and some of our vendors out in very short order. So I arrived on site shortly after 8. And it was all hands on deck. So we were staff arrived on site within the first few minutes of the fire. By the time London Fire Service had sort of determined the situation and were ready to hand the fire back to us, we were able to start remediation work within 4 hours of the fire alarm. So that contributed to a healthy reset for the building. Unfortunately, through the fire event, a lot of issues with smoke on the 6th floor. Pleased to report that the firebox itself, so the units and their construction, they did what we expected them to do. Their cinder block construction, so the fire did not move outside of that unit box, which is great for getting the building back in order and making sure the building stays safe. So we're very fortunate in that regard, but it's very unfortunate. There was a number of tenants who experienced smoke inhalation and a lot of stress created because of the fire. So we're happy to report that most tenants were able to return 4 days later on April 8th. So Wednesday of the week. So we had worked around the clock to restore the floor, clean the place, dry it out, and get everything up and running. There were some tenants that had a slight delay in that, and those are the ones affected by water, as we needed to dry the water out of the units below it for the electrical system to be safely operated. So through the course of that week, we were able to coordinate with our internal teams and external contractors, get that work done. Ongoing coordination is happening as we sort of look at restoring the building. We did have one elevator out of service that was pending parts. It was one of the newly refurbed elevators and it had suffered some water damage. So that repair is ongoing. We were on fire watch, which means our fire safety system wasn't fully functional. And that's primarily because the fire unit itself burnt some of the fire wires within the unit, which affected the chain, which made us do that. So we maintain that. We are looking at, we're doing ongoing assessments on the balconies and railings around the fire. The fire had an exterior point of origin, so on the balcony itself. So you'll see on the visual pictures, the balcony railing is burnt through. So we've done the engineering assessment on the slabs and we'll do some remediation work there as well as the railing system itself to make sure we repair that. So those areas are blocked off. So some disruption remains and that will take place until we get all the permanent electrical and, you know, we had to pull the roof system off on the 6th floor. So until that's back up and running and all those things. So we will sort of work to minimize that disruption for tenants. And we are working with Canadian Mental Health Association, which is, we have a partnership with that thing to sort of work with tenants on their support. So I think overall, I will just like to thank LMCH staff, the London Fire Service, London Police, Middlesex and London Paramedics and London Transit for sort of being there, coming to support of the site and just working through with us to support the tenants. And I just, you know, thank our tenants for sort of working through this disruption with us. We're hoping that everything is sort of returned to as close to normal as we can for them. And we sort of get the building back up and running. I think overall, when we reflect on it, our response was immediate. It was coordinated and focused on getting tenants home as quick as possible. So I think our work with our staff and vendors to get people back occupied within 5 business days is exceptional, right? So it just says there's a little dedication, there's a focus, and we're sort of working at the fastest, safest approach we can to make sure our tenants have clean, safe housing. So happy to take any questions on the fire.
Thank you.
Myself or
Before the question, can we move in second? You'll move it, you'll second, just to receive that report, and you have questions.
Through the chair, this is more just a comment. So I have mutual clients that live in that building that were affected by this.
Okay.
And I will say, I was working behind the scenes with them too, and they had nothing but good things to say about the staff at London Housing for the fact that they were communicating and they got them back in there as fast as possible, got them to a safe place and was keeping them updated throughout, because this person does not do well with change, and he was very thankful for the way that it was handled.
Yeah, I think we have some exceptional staff. We have a lot of exceptional staff. And so I think some people really made it their mission to make sure that connection was there. And I think we were able to sort of reflect on, they left in a hurry, you know, just the simple fact of offering them to come back within, you know, the next day to get what they needed. What do they need to get through the next 4 days? So I think we were thoughtful and purposeful. And Sarah's team really was focused on the tenant experience as well as getting the building back and running. And we didn't compromise in either.
And through the chair, if I could comment,
Sure.
and that it continues. So Alyssa and her team next week have an engagement plan at Simcoe, continuing the dialogue involving CMHA. This was quite traumatic for many tenancies, just the experience, right? The fire alarm's going off, what to do, having friends, someone said, I heard someone screaming, I can't get that out of my head. It's a very traumatic experience. And so although we are confident in how the building's coming along, we know that people's memories don't just wash away that quickly, right? So the tenant services team has more things planned in the future, like this coming week, and I think subsequently, to just stay engaged and to not assume that only those who are impacted by their living arrangements for a few days were the only ones who were affected. We're learning that even those who, weren't even home, but just the thought of this happening are still struggling with the idea that something catastrophic could have happened. So
Thank you.
Sounds good. Anything further? All those in favor of receiving that? Stop. So we're gonna go to the in-camera agenda, and then we'll have a short break just to enable people to. Proceeded pretty well on our time, so I just need a motion to go in camera, moved by Kara, seconded by Greg. All those in favor? So we are now in camera. we're back in public session. We need a motion to adjourn.
He just
Okay.
needs to hit record and then.
Oh, for God's. We're back in public session. We received 2 reports. We received them for information. And forget it. We're back in public session. Motion to adjourn. Kara, Kathleen, all in favor? There we go.